Our primary ag commodity is vineyards and wine, and we like to joke that it's probably the simplest, highest, and best use scenario.
Nick, the highest and best use of our time right now would be to explain what you have sent to us.
All right, let's pour first.
So if everyone wants to see what the wine is...
Should we take a sip?
Cheers.
Love it. Sold.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Face Value, a podcast by the Appraisal Institute. I'm Tonia Vailas.
And I'm Warren Boizot, and we are your hosts.
I'm really excited about today's episode because guess what it's about? It's all about wine. Warren, did I ever tell you growing up that we used to make wine? You know, the good old Sicilian family with a wine cellar in their basement right in the smack of New York City.
So wait a minute, where did you harvest the grapes?
Well, we did have a grapevine in the backyard, but the grapes were sour and did not make a lot, but it was very good. We had it over a pergola, so we had lots of shade, but we would order our grapes from the local garden store. So every year they'd give us a call and say the grapes are here. So we'd get to make the selection of the kind of grapes we wanted. If you want a Merlot or Cabernet or whatever variety, if you'd want to mix them. But we did all that in the backyard of our 25 by 100 lot.
In New York City.
In New York City. Wow. There's plenty of Italians in New York City that still do it. My husband wants to go back to doing wine. And I told him there's no way I can do it. And he's like, I don't stand. You love wine. Why not make it? And then we have it. My biggest fear of winemaking are the bees.
What in the world do bees have to do with winemaking? I have no idea.
No idea. So when you're making wine, they're very sweet because it's grape juice and bees love grape juice. So they flutter all around. So while you're in there literally stomping on the grapes by your feet, there's all these little bees hovering around and attacking and swarms of them. So I don't like winemaking anymore.
Fascinating. Gee, I would have never guessed. But very interesting. So, Tonia, today we have gifts that were sent to us, wonderful gifts, because we are doing a podcast about appraising wineries and everything surrounding that topic. So our guest today, who we'll introduce in a moment, sent us a couple bottles of wine so that we could do kind of a real-time tasting while we're on this podcast. He sent us a white, he sent us a red, and Nick can take us through that. But Nick Cadigan is here with us, and he is the Appraisal Director for American AgCredit's Northern California region, specializing in vineyard and winery appraisal. Hey, Nick, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Warren and Tonia, for having me today.
Why doesn't Nick tell us a little bit about himself first?
I'm based in Santa Rosa, California, which is kind of right in the heart of wine country. I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with Napa County. That's the county over to our east. I'm in Sonoma County, which is just to the west. So about an hour north of San Francisco and about 20 minutes from the Pacific Ocean. Is kind of where I'm located. So I've been appraising for over 20 years now. Geez, I started off as a residential appraiser around 2003, did that for a few years, switched over to commercial 2007. And then having grown up here in wine country, I was asked to do a lot of vineyard properties I wasn't super comfortable with. Actually had an opportunity to appraise the building I'm in now with American AgCredit. And they had an opening a couple months later and asked me if I ever considered switching over to ag. So now I've been appraising ag properties with American AgCredit ever since. So American AgCredit is part of the farm credit system. So we're a lending institution that can only lend on agricultural properties. So we're limited to that. So I've been doing this now for about 7.5 years.
Oh, that sounds very cool. I didn't even know there was a whole lending institution for agricultural land.
Yeah, the farm credit system started, it was actually an act of Congress back in 1916. They wanted to ensure that farmers always had a source of capital. And so from that, the Farm Credit Association or the administration sort of kickstarted. The whole country is divided up into various associations. Over time, there were many of them initially, and now we've sort of been in a trend of consolidation over the last couple decades. our territory includes Hawaii, New Mexico, about half of California, Nevada, Colorado, and Kansas. So we cover a lot of ground. Me being in Northern California, our primary ag commodity is vineyards and wine. And we like to joke that it's probably the simplest, highest, and best use scenario when we have a rural property in our area, because it's just a no-brainer. It's the highest and best use is to grow grapes. And so you can move on.
Nick, the highest and best use of our time right now would be to explain what you have sent to us. I do lots of wine tastings, and this is my one thing: is there's always a big speech ahead of time. Let me get to my wine, then talk to me.
Okay? All right, let's pour first. All right, let's start with the white. We'll pour it first. We'll try it, and then I'll tell you about it.
I already messed up. I already poured myself.
So if everyone wants to see what the wine is, that's the wine. And mine looks a little more chilled than yours. So while we're pouring, can you tell us the temperature that white should be chilled at and red?
Anything above freezing is probably fine. 35 degrees or whatever your fridge is at is fine for a white wine. If you're going to age it for a while, I think you want between, say, 55 to 58 degrees in a barrel. But white wine's great chilled. With a Chardonnay, especially like an oaky Chardonnay, it's probably best to take it out of the fridge maybe a couple hours in advance. Not quite get to room temperature, but less chilled seems to be the way it's enjoyed. I'm not opposed to dropping an ice cube in certain wines, but you certainly wouldn't want to do it with this wine. So, should we take a sip?
Cheers.
All right.
Love it.
So a little bit about the wine. This is a Chapelet 2019 Chardonnay. Chapelet is a good customer of ours. Their winery is actually located in Napa on Pritchard Hill, which is a really prestigious area. However, the vineyard that this fruit was sourced from is in Sonoma County in an AVA known as Petaluma Gap, which is kind of a fairly new AVA, sort of fledgling and establishing its reputation. It's close to the coast. It gets a lot of cool weather, especially in the evenings, and that's really conducive to growing high quality Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So that's kind of the specialty there. Do I have to explain what an AVA is? An AVA is
I was going to ask you, what's an AVA?
Yeah, it's an American cultural area. And really it's recognized by the TTB, which is the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau. And significance of ABAs is really, it's sort of like a marketing tool in a lot of ways. There are usually associations of grape growers and vintners within each AVA that work together, fund money so that the marketing arm of that AVA can work to establish its reputation. The other significant thing with an AVA is that you can actually depreciate the AVA value from your property. So if you have a vineyard with so many acres of vines planted, you can actually depreciate the AVA value. And there are appraisers, not myself, that specialize in appraising the AVA. So it's, in other words, the contributory value that AVA adds to the land. And that can be depreciated, which is a huge benefit for property owners and saves them quite a bit of money on taxes to have that depreciated over, I believe it's a 15-year period that it can be depreciated.
So curious, Nick, how many appraisers that specialize in appraising wineries are there, would you say?
Not many, right? I mean, wineries, they really are found throughout the nation. I get surprised when I hear of wineries, in like the South and other areas throughout the country. But, in our area, there's obviously just hundreds of wineries and probably, maybe 10 or so people that kind of specialize in that niche. And I don't think the act of appraising a winery is too difficult, but getting the information can be very difficult.
Okay, well, we're going to get into that because I'm curious about that part.
Yeah, it can be challenging to get the info, but once you have it, it's not necessarily the most complex of analysis.
You mean it's a vacant land sale analysis, pretty much.
You two commercial people show off now. You said you talk to us about that process. Let's dig in. How is it done?
Think like any kind of facility that you might appraise for whatever the product that is the end product of that facility. You kind of have to know a little bit about the operation and what it takes to be a highly functional facility versus one that might be lacking in some regard or another. But essentially, we spend the majority of our time developing relationships with the agents that specialize in this property type. Because when we need to confirm a sale, we need to know a lot of information about that sale. And a lot of times a facility sells, there's the land, there's the real estate, and there's the equipment. There may also be the brand that sells with the property, or there may be inventory that's included in that purchase price. So you really kind of have to drill in on all these factors, and you certainly wouldn't want, an MLS sale price of, $5 million and just think that's just land and real estate. There may be a lot of other elements, personal property, intangibles baked into that you need to sort through.
So are you lending on the business value or the real estate value?
Just the real estate. I don't handle the business value. There are experts that will handle business value, and those are usually the BV guys. There are plenty of wineries that sell without any brand value associated with it. I would say probably more than half are selling with just real estate and land and real estate and equipment. As opposed to brand. A lot of times, wineries that sell, there may not be any brand value. You kind of have to look at historic operating statements to understand if there's any brand that's associated with it, or the sellers aren't willing to part with their brand. They simply want a new facility, or they're going to move to more of a custom crush operation, which maybe lends itself more to a virtual winery where you don't really have your own facility. You can buy bulk wine.
Wait, virtual vineyards? Wait, go back. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you just say?
So you might have custom crush operations work where there is a winemaker, and he's making wine for a lot of different folks. And some of those folks may not have their own facility. They may not have their own vineyards, but they can source fruit through various contacts or allow the custom crush operator to bring in their own fruit, make their wine, and sell it under the virtual winery's label and brand.
Okay, so like my basement.
Although you have a facility.
We had the facility, but no name. Okay, got it.
And that one vine.
And that one vine that had sour grapes. Oh, that sounds so virtually. I guess they're doing things behind the scenes, and then someone else slaps a name on it.
I think it's brand is really hard to establish from scratch. These properties that buy and, the buyer may move in an existing brand into that space as opposed to starting one from scratch. So the folks that develop these virtual wineries are really good at developing a brand and may already have that brand in place through other sources. And going virtual and doing more of the custom crush option may just lend itself to a way to kind of maximize profits and keep and maintain efficiency.
Now, Warren, we have this beautiful white Chardonnay in front of us, right? What is the first thing we're supposed to do? Aren't we supposed to rotate?
Give it a little swirl?
And then, because I think we all did it wrong when we just took a swig of it at the beginning. So, Nick, why don't you guide us through that part?
Okay. I'm not a sommelier. I do a fair bit of wine tasting, but just going to throw that out there. Yeah, a little bit of a swirl is usually the first step. A deep sniff. You really got to get your nose in there and just really try to pull out.
The bigger nose, the better, right?
The bigger get it in there. Yeah. And then take a sip. And then the last part of wine tasting is coming up with fun adjectives to describe the wine. So what are you guys tasting in this particular wine?
Green apple.
Did you read the label?
No.
Oh.
No, I promise. But I don't know if I'm right or not.
I was going to say it's a little sweet, but it has a little woodsy flavor, if that makes any sense.
Some of my favorite adjectives for describing wine, there's like pencil shavings, which might be the woodsy that you're getting. I'm not really picking that up in this wine. And some of my favorite ones maybe apply more to red. There's like leathery. There's obviously like with the reds, more chocolatey and things like that. Cat urine is one I've seen.
That's a bad white.
Definitely don't taste it. Definitely don't taste it in this wine.
Now, Nick, do you know about the East Coast vineyards?
No, I do not.
I think there's a
Yeah.
really big, well, what they're trying, sorry, fix my glasses because I can't see you guys. They're trying to have really big competition against the West Coasters. So out on the North Fork of Long Island, we have all these vineyards. And Warren, guess what? That's by my Airbnb. Throw
Nice.
that back in there. So we have all these vineyards around us, but it's more, I think, of a an attraction as opposed to winemaking. So we have Pindar, Martha Clara. Those are some of the most more popular ones on the East Coast out here. But a lot of them are just local wineries. And, you know, on a Friday, Saturday night, they're having fun. It's just amazing. Go out there, live music, sip and taste, you know, have your flights, some cheese and crackers. And of course, you get a wine tour, but that's the thing to do out here on the weekends.
That's great. You know, we no longer have Biggie and Tupac, so we need to rejuvenate this East Coast West Coast rivalry in the wine industry. It's the natural next step.
West Coast is still winning. Ours are more for like entertainment. I think there's a lot of bachelor and bachelorette parties going on, especially this time of year. But it is something that, you know, an hour away, we can just hop in the car or a party bus and get out there and have some fun. But
you mentioned Tupac. Oh, sorry. You mentioned Tupac and Biggie. You know, the Kendrick Lamar Drake. That's the new East Coast West. I mean, Toronto is East Coast, right?
Yeah.
So there you go.
Warren, do you have vineyards by you?
The western slope of Colorado is a big wine country. I have not been out there yet, but I've been to Napa many times. Willamette Valley is the next one I want to try out. And obviously France, I want to hit there someday. But I also have heard Texas, like Austin area, right? Big wineries.
Yep.
Surprised me.
Yeah, it's, you know, wine's kind of going through a little bit of a tough time on the global scale. There are consumption trends going down, but it sure seems like these wineries are becoming very popular all throughout the country. It's no longer a France and Napa thing, but it really has expanded into almost every state. I think almost every state, minus maybe a couple of obvious ones, has a vineyard and a winery on it. I was in Hawaii recently. They have a winery on the Big Island.
It's not too hot to have a winery there?
Well, it's not. Yeah, it never really gets too hot there. It's pretty much 82 degrees every time I've been there, like just so steady. But, you know, wine is finicky, and it probably needs a little bit more heat than what it can offer there in the growing season, that is. But yeah, there's certain varietals that do okay out there. The wines tend to be sweeter. You know, the more you travel, I think the more you realize why Napa and Sonoma kind of are what they are. The conditions are just perfect for it. California does have wine regions that are kind of more like you're describing. They're more hospitality driven. Down in Temecula, which is in Southern California, that's a very popular wine growing region where the hospitality component seems to be the main driver of traffic to the wineries there. A lot of the wineries are set up as hotels and resorts and host weddings and things like that. Whereas Napa and Sonoma is certainly not for the faint of heart. It really is for those passionate about wine, at least from a price perspective. Or
I was going to say, passionate about a low balance on your credit card. Those that are, yeah, definitely. It's always sticker shock the 2 weeks when I return from Napa. Wow. Yeah. That hurts. Very interested, Nick, in what you comment you made about consumption rates. So it's obviously, you mean it's going down. Is there any theory as to why?
Yeah, there's a few. One is generational. For a couple decades, baby boomers were the main driver of wine consumption throughout the U.S. As they are sort of aging out, purchasing less wine. Millennials, who are kind of coming into their own now, right, economically, they're opting perhaps to not purchase as much wine as the baby boomer predecessors. And there are a lot of alternatives, right? There's craft beer, there's cocktails, there's, I suppose, cannabis. There's also a large contingency of folks who aren't interested in drinking alcohol, those numbers are down. I think there's health concerns about overconsumption of alcohol that has made its way into younger generations, and a lot of them are choosing not to drink at all. So all those factors are playing into it. I know in our area, there's a lot of why aren't the millennials drinking wine, but price points aren't really conducive to a lot of younger folks drinking wine, especially living in an area that's one of the most expensive areas to live in the U.S. So there are some issues here locally, but this is kind of a global trend that we're seeing in terms of consumption's slowing down from what we've seen in prior decades.
Here in Denver, we're seeing a handful of non-alcoholic mocktail bars that are popping up everywhere. That's a big thing. I was also going to tell you that I recently did a sake tasting. I'm a big sake fan. And the crazy thing is that drop in consumption in Japan, I guess it's a big problem there, that everybody there drinks whiskey. So that, you think Japan, you think sake, you think Japan, but they're in the same thing that you talk about with wine. The consumption rate is just dropping in lieu of and making way for whiskey.
Yeah. You figured, let's say a $50 bottle of wine, and you tend to maybe drink it with a couple other people in one night, whereas a bottle of whiskey is going to last you quite a while. And you can certainly get a bottle of whiskey for less than $50. So, I'm sure a lot of people are sort of forced to make those economic decisions too with their purchasing dollars. And I didn't mention seltzers, but that's a fairly recent trend. And, I think that's pulling a lot of folks in and competing with, say, white wine on the shelves at the grocery store. So there's a lot of barriers out there for wine to overcome. So we'll see them get creative. There's been a few wine seltzer versions out there, so I think they're finding their footing. There were wine coolers were really big back in the 80s and maybe early 90s. I think we might see a resurgence of that, or at least that being trending and being another option on the shelf.
Canned wine, canned champagne. I see it
boxed
all. Yeah.
Wine, you mean boxed wine.
Well, cans too.
The best sangria is out of boxed wine, right?
Quick, funny seltzer story for you. A girl at my gym's husband, this is years ago, didn't know that White Claw was an alcoholic beverage and would have one on his way to work every morning thinking it was an energy drink. And so a coworker of his had to say, what are you doing with a White Claw at 8 a.m? So that was pretty funny.
It goes down real smooth.
Well, hopefully not driving in that with that open in the car.
Well, that I think probably was an issue.
On the appraisal front, you talked about a few things: location, I guess, improvements on the site. You talked about some business value going on, and the labeling, right? The manufacturing and what you call it, the FF&E of the facility. Do you guys use the cost approach when you do winery appraisals?
Yeah, that's fairly common to use. What we've seen over the last maybe 4 years or so, due to the inflationary environment, the cost approach isn't making a lot of sense on some of these wineries because the replacement cost is so high, and we just don't have the sales that really support it. So that's been a bit of a challenge to use in recent years because there's just this discrepancy between replacement costs and what sales are out there. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the things that wineries are known for are like super adequacies. They tend to they have a very clear vision of what they want their winery to look like. They don't care so much about the costs because they feel like, well, if I can get $150 per bottle of wine, I have, in order to do that, I might need to have an amazing experience at my winery, which means additional landscaping and hospitality elements that might be very costly to produce. So much like residential appraisal, there's that emotional component.
I like how you put that back in for Warren. Made him happy.
Yeah.
Well, he started out as a residential guy, so.
people probably ask you, how much is a view worth? You know, and it's like, it's kind of like those emotional components that also play into winery appraisal, because it can be a very emotional experience. I do a lot of vineyards
as well.
I do a lot of vineyards. And if you own a winery and your neighboring vineyard comes up for sale, you're going to pay top dollar for that. And we see a lot of that sort of assemblage motivation in the purchasing that goes on here, because these are generational opportunities. There's only so much land out here that's right for vineyard development. And both of the counties are pretty much well planted out, meaning we can't create any more land. So when something comes on the market, it's a scarce resource, and you usually have a lot of folks interested in purchasing it. That is less so the case in more of the peripheral areas around Sonoma and Napa, or in the Central Valley, or in the southern part of the state.
You guys ready for our second bottle?
On to the red.
On to the red.
So this bottle is a Hartford Family Wines. They're a part of the Jackson Family Wines family. It is a 2018 Pinot Noir.
Gotta label. Do this sniff test the right way this time, right?
Okay, let's do that first. Swirl, and sniff.
Nick, do you judge people whether they're stem full or stemless? I'm a stemless.
Warren!
Nice. Yeah. These are our official face value wine glasses.
Did you read mine?
No.
Good luck finding better neighbors than us. This is from my friends who I moved away from in our new home, and I had to give them a shout out on this podcast. But I love that you're stemless as well.
I could drink out of my cost does not equal value cup, and it depends.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you, Nikki Close, Colorado Chapter Appraisal Institute.
So the sniff, it smells like my dad's wine.
I taste or smell aromas of crushed quartz. I'm just reading the back of the label.
Okay, I'm like, I don't know what quartz tastes like. I wasn't sure I was supposed to eat that.
Wet paper towel.
Oh.
That's what I'm getting.
A few things about labels, which I find kind of interesting. So the label says Sonoma Coast. That's actually the AVA, right? In order to use the AVA on a label, 85% of the fruit must come from that AVA. Okay. This is also a vineyard designate. Land's Edge Vineyards is the actual name of the vineyard that this is sourced from. It's a coastal vineyard, high elevation, but very close to the coast. And in order to put a vineyard designate name on it, 95% of the fruit must come from that vineyard. So there's kind of a lot that goes in.
And match.
Yeah, only, if you wanted to use, I think, Sonoma County, only 75% of the fruit would need to come from that county. And then you could blend wine from other regions with that to make up the 100.
So this also says black cherry. Does that include a little cherry in here? Because that I do taste. Not just reading off the label. I do taste the black cherry.
That's a very common taste and note in Pinot Noir.
Nick, you don't have to tell us a name if you don't want to, but just give our listeners an idea of the most expensive winery that you've ever appraised. What's that number?
Well, I can think of, in sales that have happened, and I won't attach a name to it, but it's not uncommon for us to see wineries that sell, maybe in the $50 to $60 million range.
Okay.
There have been larger vertically integrated wineries that's sold with the business value and the brand associated with it, 275 million. Again, a lot of real estate assets and a large allocation made to the brand value on something like that. It really depends because, there's these wineries come in all different shapes and sizes. Around here, typical winery might be between 5,000 to like 30,000 cases of production a year. Okay. But out in the Central Valley, there are giant tank farms that are producing millions of gallons. And so the value of something like that contrasted with a smaller boutique winery, really things can be kind of all over the map.
And I'm trying to obviously picture being in Napa, seeing the hillside and grapes growing. what kind of acreage are you talking about? I mean, I know it could be all over the board, but typically.
So wineries that maybe don't have that much vineyard associated with it, because you can source fruit from anywhere in the county. Those, the smallest might be just a couple acres, maybe on the outskirts of one of the local cities. One that I've appraised recently was about 275 acres, but it only had 10 acres planted to vines and maybe 5 acres dedicated to the winery facility and a home on the property. And the rest was just rugged terrain that really was not very functional for any development, whether it's vineyard or structures.
Do you find that the way that their harvesting is different? Because I remember grapevines used to go up and over, and now it looks like they're harvesting them vertically to gain more vines per density. They're increasing the density of the grapevines. Do you see that more often or change in harvesting?
Yeah, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish in the vineyard. There are certain regions and certain varieties where it's all about getting max yields. And then you'll see the potential for specific canopy structures that are conducive to that, tighter spacing to create more yields on a per acre basis. In other areas, it's all about quality, where vineyard managers will intentionally drop fruit off the vine at certain stages throughout the growing season to promote the best quality fruit possible. And they're not worried about getting 6 tons an acre. They're happy with 3 tons an acre as long as it's the highest quality. And if you think about that, heck, if you can sell a 3 tons an acre at $150 a bottle, or sell the 6 tons an acre at $10 a bottle, the economics will probably work in your favor at the higher quality, lower volume scenario. So it really depends. Labor's gotten really expensive, especially out here in California. So a lot of the vineyard costs have gone up tremendously, and some of the decisions on how you farm vineyards has changed. There's been a movement to mechanize that to the extent possible. There are really cool machine harvesters that will straddle, that tickle the vines and get the fruit off the vines. They typically do this at night. Those machines can be like $500,000, but it's a way to avoid the large labor costs that are associated, especially with the harvest season.
What about tax credits? Do you see any agricultural tax credits on your side of the country?
That I'm less familiar with. I know it's not really a tax credit, but the depreciation on the AVA is a big consideration.
Okay. On this side, the state and local governments offer tax credits because farming was going away. Like New York does not have much farmland left, especially on Long Island. It was getting populated by residential or commercial development. So they put tax credits and incentives where they do not allow any development, and they're forcing the farms to continue to operate. So I remember about 20 years ago, it was like kind of tough. Like we can't do anything but farms, but that's why the, wine industry is growing back, and they've created a little community where they have these vineyards and, local activity in the neighborhoods. The farms have pumpkin patches and apples and seasonal fruits that they are constantly trying to get families, especially with younger children, to come and visit. And on the side, you have the vineyards where they offer wines. So I know, and especially on the Long Island front, it was going away, but now it's back, and it's good because it's kept the communities going, and it stopped overpopulation. So just something on this side of the country that we're doing, or was done.
We do have a Williamson Act, for any property that's kept in agricultural use, you can enter into a Williamson Act contract with the state for a reduction in your property taxes. And if you want to get out of that, it's you either pay kind of a large fee, or it's a 9-year process to exit out of that.
And you can't grow for 9 years, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's it's a big tax break, and for a lot of our regions here, the prospect of changing land uses is not great. We have most of our urban communities have urban growth boundaries, and we try to do as much infill development as opposed to sprawl type of growth, especially in Napa and Sonoma. So that's kind of been a way to ensure that ag land is kind of here to stay, what we have left. So between that and the Williamson Act are probably the main drivers for the incentives to keep things in ag.
Climate change. How is that impacting? I know that I saw really cool recently a 60 Minutes piece about how positively, because of the climate change and heat index going up around the globe, that I think it was England now is becoming a new hotspot for wine. Talk to us a little bit about just overall like climate change and how that's impacting your world.
Well, I just watched the British Open. It didn't look like that country's warming up anytime soon, but you're right. There's a lot you could talk about with that. Climate change seems to have an impact. We've had a really extensive drought that's kind of hopefully slowing down. We had a couple good years of rain the last 2 years, but that drought led to significant wildfires. And we've had really just devastated by wildfires between really, I think the first one was 2015 through 2020. The glass fire in 2020 was ripped through much of Napa and Sonoma County and took out a couple wineries, damaged a lot of vineyards. Vineyards are actually pretty resilient to fires. There's a lot of moisture in the vines, and so they don't necessarily catch fire. But the smoke from the fires can taint the grapes and show up in the notes in the final end product. And there was a really big learning lesson in a 2017 fire for us to learn about the impact of what that smoke meant. And we weren't really well established at testing for it. And then the crop insurance kind of became another interesting wrinkle with how to deal with that. So we're seeing the impacts of that play out in those two scenarios. And just on kind of a more anecdotal level, a winery that's pending sale now, located in kind of Up Valley, Napa, which is a lot warmer than the southern portions of Napa County that are closer to the San Francisco Bay. One buyer who was interested in finding a winery in Napa County, I guess, decided to explore a different option because they were worried about 30 years from now what the climate conditions look like in those warmer areas of Napa County. And that's just Napa County. I mean, there are a lot of other much hotter growing regions further north in Mendocino and Lake County, also in the Central Valley, more interior California. It's not uncommon to have 110 degree days out there. So it'll be interesting to see that play out over the next few decades. But to see the impact from fires and drought, and then to see the anecdotal evidence where people are making decisions based on those future concerns, suggests that the concerns kind of here today and is being considered.
Kind of on that note with environmental, have you seen an impact with the lanternfly infestations? I
have not. I know there was a few headlines with that. Vineyard managers are pretty amazing folks, and they've seen it all. They take steps to deal with whatever comes at them. We've had the glassy wing sharpshooter. We've had phylloxera. I think that we'll be equipped to deal with whatever comes our way.
What was that, Warren?
Bees.
There are plenty of bees at the vineyard.
You're hyper focused on insects. Wow. So Tonia, we got 2 wines sent to us. Tell me your ranking. What do you like better?
Well, it depends on my mood. So I love Pinot Noir.
You only get one for the rest of your life. Which one?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. One for the rest of my life? I'd go with the Chardonnay. I don't know why. Just on these two, I'd go with the Chardonnay. Okay. I think because I could drink more of it.
Okay.
Does that count?
It does. And I'm going to go the other side. I'm always a red fan. And Nick, thank you. I'm a Pinot Noir fan. So perfect.
But Nick, we need your favorite. Which do you prefer?
The Pinot I am liking. Some Pinots have a tendency to be taste a little bit more watered down. And I feel like this really does have a lot of good cherry sort of vibes to it. And I'm picking up on the kind of the robustness of it. And so I'm definitely gravitating towards it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sending those, Nick. And real quick to our listeners, I want to tell you how quickly things happen on the Face Value podcast. Tonia and I were texting one time, as we do, to just kick around ideas for a podcast. This was, I think, as of taping 11 days ago. We got on a text and something came up about wineries. We said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to have somebody who appraises vineyards or wineries?
Take a step back. Take a step back. You sent me a picture of Pareja, but you say it a little differently.
That's right.
So there's a wine out there called Pareja, which is a Greek wine, and Pareja means a group of friends.
And in my Denver accent, that's Pareja.
In Denver accent, it's Pareja.
To bring it full circle, our listeners will know about the Pareja program, and I just thought it was interesting. I bought the bottle of wine specifically because it was the Pareja label, and so I sent that picture.
I'm like, oh my God, thank you, Warren. I love you too.
And so we thought that'd be a great idea. Let's get somebody on who does winery or vineyard appraisals. And I think I texted our mutual friend, Nick, Chris Highmore. Shout out to another Colorado chapter person, one of my favorites, Chris Highmore. He hooked us up, and by the next morning, we had you scheduled, and here we are 11 days later. That's how quickly things happen. So to you listeners out there, if you have an idea, and better yet, if you have a person to go with that idea, your idea can get on here pretty quickly.
If you mail them the right amount of wine.
It helps. It helps.
If these topics, vineyard and winery valuation, are of interest to anyone, we are looking at hosting a vineyard valuation seminar through the Appraisal Institute. We're targeting a specific location I'm not quite ready to announce, but it will be in wine country of Northern California sometime in the middle of November. So please stay tuned to the local chapter website or the numerous emails that are circulated with upcoming educational events, and keep that on your radar if you are interested in attending that session.
And Nick, keep us on that list. Warren and myself, we may show up.
That would be great. And maybe we can try some more wines together.
Sounds good. Please reach out to us anytime at facevalue@theappraisalinstitute.org. Again, facevalue@appraisalinstitute.org. On that note, thank you and have a great rest of your day, morning, noon, or night.
Thank you very much. And be sure to subscribe and listen on Spotify and YouTube.
Cheers.